Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. Today I have Victor Hugo Gomez here with me, who's, as you can tell, not originally from Germany, but nonetheless, he built up a successful startup here in lovely Frankfurt. Hola, ¿qué tal?
Hola, ¿qué tal? It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. You are here because your startup BITA Data?
Yeah, BITA.
BITA, just simply BITA?
Just BITA.
Just BITA, and everybody who would like to find this BITA, because I also had trouble, go down here in the show notes. You'll have a link to the company website and, of course, to Victor's LinkedIn profile that I already put here. That's why I'm always looking at it. But before we get into what BITA actually does, can we talk a little bit about you? Because at first I was thinking, okay, it has something to do with data and financial indexes, but actually it's nothing people would think straight out of their mind. Oh, let's do an index company. They rather think, let's do e-commerce, let's do something like this, very simple stuff. So how did you get this idea?
Yeah, definitely. So let me start by maybe giving you a little bit of background on myself. As you probably can tell by my accent, I'm originally from Venezuela. My background is in economics and finance. I started my career first in management consulting, and then I worked for several years in investment consulting, working for Mercer, advising pension funds, where I used to advise pension funds on topics like asset allocation, portfolio structuring. So already during that time, I got a very close relationship with let's say, the world of indexation and passive investments. After that, I had a first startup, which didn't scale as I would have wished, which we sold to a competitor. And then from there, I took the decision of going to Germany and to live to Germany. I did my MBA between Germany and the US. And then right after that, I started working for the Deutsche Börse, for the German stock exchange, being responsible for innovation on the data business, which included both the data part as well as the index side of the business. Did that for some years. And then during my last couple of years in the exchange, I actually was a VC. So I had the task together with a colleague to set up the corporate venture capital structure for the German stock exchange. So I was one of the first members of the team of the CVC of the German exchange, and I came to a point after spending quite some time working with the startups and talking to startups around the world. I always had that entrepreneurial, let's say, inclination, and I felt that my time to go back into entrepreneurship had come. The idea behind BITA was something that I had already for some time, and I think that's something that for me it's always critical, is that it's always good when you have the luxury of setting up a startup where you can specialize on a problem that you had before, right? And in this case, both from the time that I was consumer of indexes, so the time where I work at Mercer Consulting, all the way to the time where I was basically provider of indexes, and I was involved with the Stocks, which is the index company of the German stock exchange. I had realized several things. Number one is the index space is highly attractive. So the companies that operate in that space tend to be very profitable. All of them tend to have operating margins of over 60%. And those are businesses that are growing very rapidly. They're growing rapidly because passive investments are growing massively. So
we may tell the people out there, because not everybody has a background in like financial services, what the indexes are that we are talking about. Most people may know DAX or Dow Jones Industrial Average, S&P 500. So basically that's an aggregation of data. They start at one point, and then through different methods, all those constituents, as they are called. They're the members of an index, get aggregated and calculated into an index real time, or very fast, or on a daily basis. So there are like hundreds and thousands of indices out there. Most people just know, for example, the famous equity ones, but there are also the formerly Lehman aggregated bond indices, now Barclays. Yeah, there's MSCI, Morgan Stanley Capital International. They have like huge emerging market indices with like several thousand constituents. So it can be a big business, just for the simple reason that if you have a mutual fund, or if you have a derivative which wants to orientate itself or have the benchmark with this index, or for derivative as reference value, as underlying, basically they need to pay you fees, and that's how those companies make profit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's two main use cases, exactly like you said. There's two main uses of indexes. The first use is you are an active fund in the majority of the cases, and you need an index to serve as a reference, as you say, right? So you evaluate your performance against that index, and in that case, you will pay the index provider a license fee in order to use their index as a reference rate. That's one use case. And that was the original use case for indexes. In that box, under that box, you will have the typical DAX, the Standard & Poor's 500, the Russell 1000, etc. Now, since certain years ago, because a lot of the investors have tried to, on one hand, reduce their costs, but on the other hand, get more effective ways to a particular asset class to access, a new use case for indexes have been developed, which is basically the passive investment side, where the index is the underlying investment strategy, or you could even say it's even the underlying asset manager of your investment product. And that's a typical case of an ETF.
So basically, you can have an ETF, it's like a mutual fund, but basically there's no active management, there's like a passive management, and they're just doing the same stuff as the index, meaning either they have like the same amount of equity of shares in their index, or they replicate it, meaning they are replicating this via derivatives.
Exactly. That's exactly the case. And that second use case, especially, is what brought us to start BITA, because as more and more specific exposures are being migrated from active management into passive management, clients of index providers are requesting more and more specific implementation of indexes. So what is happening is that today, more than ever, clients of index providers are going to the index provider and saying, hey, I want you to build me an index that gives me exposure to, let's say, Japanese equities, but I want you to have a restriction on liquidity, and I want to have an ESG angle on it, so I only want to invest in companies that have a good ESG score, and by the way, I want to limit the turnover of the portfolio. So they come with very specific requests to the index provider, and the index provider then normally takes some weeks to develop a strategy, to backtest it, and to deliver it to the client. And it's exactly, yeah, so you wanted to say something, or?
No, that's usually something that is done by institutional investors. Not every retail investor has actually the opportunity to create an index, but basically they're also like for precious materials, for commodities. So there are even climate indices for weather derivatives. So everybody who would like to learn more about this, of course, go down here in the show notes. We'll have some links on that as well. So there's a huge universe of indices out there.
Exactly. And the problem is the following. So you have that scenario where clients go to the index providers and they come with very specific requests. So how it normally works is client sends a request, index provider takes, as I said, 3, 4, 5 weeks to develop something. They present it to the client. The client then might want to reparameterize something or perform a change. Then that index goes back into the index provider, they recalibrate, and back to the client. If after several iterations, the client is happy with the result and they say, okay, I want to license that index, then normally the index provider will charge the client a quite significant license fee, which in most cases, it will have a variable component, which means that if the client turns that into a fund, for every asset that that fund has under management, the index provider will get a small percentage. And the problem is that the whole process sometimes takes too long. And in other cases, the asset manager has issues with the fees because they say, hey, so when I scale my fund, right, and I grow my fund on assets, I keep paying proportionally the same to the index provider. So my margins are not improving. And that's an ubiquitous issue in the industry today.
And so basically, that is why there's so many like indices out there, and that's the way you're making money, because you help the people to get to compose, let's say compose, to put together indices, right?
Well, that's exactly where we are different. So what we're trying to do at BITA is that infrastructure that an index provider normally runs in-house in order to provide services to their clients, which means backtesting systems, data management systems, calculation systems, all that technology. What we are doing is that we're developing it on a very efficient way, and we are licensing it to clients, which means that clients can go to BITA and instead of licensing an index from us, they can license the technology and they can develop indexes in-house, shortening the product development time significantly, being way more flexible when it comes to develop new products and services, and then just paying a software license instead of paying an index license.
Ah, I see. So basically, you are cutting into the business of those usual index providers and the people who aggregate those indices for others. That's basically, you cut out a middleman.
Yeah, and in not on all the cases we will necessarily expect to cut them out. I think we are complementary. So what we can expect that could happen quite often is that clients will license, for example, our backtesting software. They will run all their product development on our backtesting software, saving costs on their side. But then the client, in a lot of cases, they might decide, hey, but I want a Standard & Poor's to calculate my index, which for us, it's also fine. So in that case, we license the software, the client creates the idea on the software, and then goes to Standard & Poor's with a very concrete idea already of what they want, completely parameterized. And then Standard & Poor's can perform calculations. So I normally refrain myself from saying that we are directly competing with them. I think in a lot of the cases, we can be a complementary offering.
I see. And that is basically the business. So you're very deep capital market B2B service offering in financial services, and I think you're at completely right place here in Frankfurt with that. And how did you approach to raise venture capital? Because you've been on the investor side before, so it's a little bit it's interesting for our audience to hear what were your thoughts going into this venture.
Yeah. So first thing I must say is that not necessarily having been a VC makes the fundraising exercise less complicated, right? So at the end of the day, the basics are the same. You need to ensure that you have a very strong value proposition. You need to have a very strong team. You need to be very clear on how are you going to make your business scale and on where do you see yourself on certain amount of years, right? And then you just go out there and you need to target the right type of investors for your business. So I think what the great advantage that we had at BITA is that the team had a lot of experience on the very particular niche that we're trying to cover. And we have the luxury of operating on an industry which on one hand is a niche, but on the other hand is huge, right? So So the potential is massive for the company, and I think that's something that is very well received by investors. In this case, we raised our first round was right at the beginning, just to have enough capital to prove the concept and to have a first system out. That we did raising from angel investors, and then at a second step, we raised a seed round from two large institutional investors, PCs.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically where we found you, in the internet, going through English-speaking blogs on the other hand. But basically, we connected. Very happy about that. Talking about your clientele, since the index is not per se restricted in any form, so basically you can have clients from all over the world. You're not limited in terms of financial regulation, right?
No, we're not. So as an index provider, the only thing that we need to make sure is that whenever we start offering administration services, we need to be regulated, and that is here in Europe. That's a regulation that only exists in Europe, which is called the European Benchmark Regulation, and that's something that we're already applying to receive the certification. But that's only for the administration case. Aside from that, in order to calculate indexes, that's a global business. You can have clients all around the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That sounds good. What are your plans for the future? You talked about proving that it's scalable. So basically, how long this may take you?
Yeah. So the first thing that we did is we developed our calculation system. That system we launched in around September, October last year. We were live. That is already on a full version. We have more than 10 clients, all of them large B2B companies using us for index calculation. So that's been a very, very big success story for us. And now on the short term, our second objective for this year is to finish the development of our second system, which is our index backtesting software, which is called BITA Core. That second system, it's not so much targeted at trading firms, which is what we are right now doing business with. That second system is going to be more targeted at asset managers and institutional investors like pension funds.
We may add for our viewers and listeners that basically backtesting means you have now an idea with an index, and basically you go back in time and you collect the data for several years, as far as you can go back in some cases, and then test how it has been faring in the past, and you basically show this to potential investors.
Exactly. So today, most of our clients are on the calculation side, and they went to BITA because we have a very powerful system, and we're able to provide real-time calculation where we tick a price in less than a second. So we're able to calculate, process massive amounts of data, and come up with an index price every tick.
That is pretty cool. So basically, everybody who'd like to learn more about you guys can go down here in the show notes, and there is a link to your company website, of course, to your personal LinkedIn profile, so people can reach out to you directly and learn more, and hopefully you'll keep us up to date.
Of course. Happy to answer any questions or have any call with anyone interested on what we're doing.
Great. Greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.